some of the various ways that the diversity that emerged in the late 60s at the formation of the United Methodist Church have been expressed, have been through the flowering of various single issue caucus advocacy groups, caucus Methodism, which really emerged for the first time in 1972 in Atlanta at the General Conference there from 72 onwards. So living into our identity as United Methodists, black, female, gay and lesbian, theologically diverse, these have been the fault lines that have been argued over in various ways for the entire history of the United Methodist Church from 68 to the present. In 1972, BMCR unveiled its work. Also, Affirmation, caucus group affirming gay and lesbian rights, first as laity, but then moving on even today, for the last 40 years, the line of advocacy has moved from rights as laity, which were established in 1972 at the General Conference, that all persons, that Methodism recognizes that all persons are of sacred worth, and so lay membership is affirmed for gay and lesbians, but that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. That was also first legislated into General Conference polity in 1972 as well. Conservative groups have continued to proliferate also. The Good News Movement have petitioned to countermand some of the work, particularly on gay and lesbian rights. The gay and lesbian rights movement has moved today, after 40 years of work on this. Pastors are no longer being defrocked, gay and lesbian pastors. The trend now, upheld by Judicial Council, is to censure, to suspend openly gay and lesbian pastors, and to involve them in a process of discernment over their covenant with the United Methodist Church, but not simply in every case, to defrock. So a kind of quasi-status for gay and lesbian pastors exists today, and the real line of conflict is over shall we celebrate same-sex marriages. We can see this in even the 2012 material for the General Conference, meeting at this time to restore them. What's complicating issues today is that the growing global connection of Methodism, United Methodism, particularly in Africa and the Philippines, is culturally set against recognizing legally, both in the church and in society, the rights of homosexuals. And so new forms of Christian identity that live towards the new creation often put us in tension between faithfulness to our tradition and justice that demands transformation. So we are called to make disciples of the nations and cultures of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and how that transformation takes place through institutional means and the application of power continues to vex us on issues, not only United Methodists, but Christians throughout the world. But this institutional distrust shown at General Conference, the plea for unity and to say I do to all for the sake of the gospel lived out for the transformation of the world, has meant that bishops are, through their teaching powers, have begun to regain more authority to speak within congregations, particularly in pastoral episcopal letters. General boards and agencies are being downsized as well, and so episcopal authority has grown, but truly its local church authority and the power of laity beginning to show itself in some very powerful ways. In particular, the change in 2008 of the mission statement of Methodism, of United Methodism, to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. The laity spearheaded this kind of theological rethink of our mission statement. So the issue of what unites us in regions and across our cultural, ethnic, sexuality differences continues to play a part. But women have made important strides in this area. 1972 General Conference saw the creation of COSRO, the Commission on the Status and the Role of Women, which has put women's ministry interest at the heart of church work through general agencies and conferences. And from 1956, when the first full female member of clergy, Maud Jensen, a returning missionary who had been ordained while in Korea, returned in 1956. To 1967, Margaret Heinrichsen of Maine was the first district superintendent. Until 1980, Marjorie Matthews elected the first female bishop of the United Methodist Church, and indeed the first female bishop of all mainline Protestantism. The role of women has grown slowly but surely, and the increasing strength of voice and acumen of women's leadership can be seen. The General Board of Higher Education has a number of statistics. About 10,000 United Methodist clergy are women at this time, in 2012, showing signs of great leadership. That's about 27% of the total clergy number. However, only 21.5% of pastors in charge are women, about a fifth, and only about 1% of pastors, senior pastors of churches over 1,000 members are actually women, whereas 6% comparatively are men, 6% of the total clergy force. But women are showing disproportional amounts of representation as DS. 15% of all female elders, 15% of the roughly 10,000 female clergy are DSs, exerting strong leadership in that area. Whereas as bishops, there have been 21 women elected bishop by the United Methodist Church. 16 are active. 13 female bishops are North American, and 3 are serving the central conferences abroad. So about 13 of 48 present bishops in North America are female, which is roughly proportional to the 27% of women who are female clergy. Resistance can be strong towards the large churches, as we can see. Only 1% of 1,000-member churches are senior pastor female clergy. But female students have entered United Methodist seminaries in record numbers. The number of female students in United Methodist graduate seminaries, according to the ATS, Association of Theological Schools, tripled between 2002 and 2003, from 10,000 to 32,000. So the numbers are changing. Roughly a little bit more than half of seminary students are female. What that shows is that there's a growing number of female potential leaders holding much promise for the future. In terms of our worship tradition, the overall trajectory has been in the 20th century of moving from the spontaneous and closed, ritualized Methodist patterns of the 19th century, ritualized around camp meeting, transformational, personal theology, towards recovering more ancient liturgical orders, but also being more open to diversity. You'll want to know the significant developments of each of these book of worships that we've had in the 20th century, and also the hymnal tradition. The 1944 book of worship was the first time worship was pulled out of the discipline, and it carried forward the historic rituals of Methodism in the one book of worship of the Methodist Church. The 1964 book of worship revision already saw the EUB merger and brought in EUB ritual materials. Particularly the Eucharist ritual was highly influenced by the EUB, and the lectionary became. This is the first book of worship that had connections with the lectionary. The 1992 book of worship added emphases from our Anglican heritage and offered rituals of great diversity that were in the 1970s. New Eucharistic patterns and baptismal liturgies were finally brought into one order there, one volume. When it comes to unity, perhaps hymnals have been our one shining light. Whenever the debate at annual or general conference is too hot and about to split the delegations, strong bishops, wise bishops, call us to stand and sing, particularly a Wesleyan hymn. And this has probably brought more united expressions to our faith, and probably taught us our theology and our best practices, the hymnal tradition. The 1905 hymnal here and the 1935 hymnals were joint productions of the Northern and Southern churches, which probably created a trust and a liturgical unity that found easier form in political unity. The 1905 hymnal here brought the 19th century hymn heritage, the traditions forward into the 19th century, but the progressivist, modernist debates, scientific progressivism of the 30s were reflected in the hymn of 1935, which anticipated the union of the Northern Southern churches. My old Bishop Nolan Harmon was on the hymnal committee there, my old professor of history. It carried some of the hearty camp meeting gospel songs forward, but the social and scientific principles of progress of the age held pride of place, and some Wesleyan hymns were discarded. The Cokesbury hymnal of the 1930s really supplanted and provided the hearty camp meeting songs, and we continue to use the Cokesbury today in many Sunday school classes. The 1964 Methodist hymnal, which I grew up coloring in when I was a little kid bored in church, was also under the leadership of Bishop Harmon and Candler's own soon-to-be Bishop William Cannon. Thought it proper to restore the Wesleyan hymns to the hymnal tradition, and in an odd back to Wesley movement at a time in the 60s when progressive ideas about worship were coming into being in more diverse forms in the culture. So it kind of went against the open tide. The Beatles had emerged and music was in ferment, and we went back in many cases to a Wesleyan corpus, including some of the EUB tradition. Gender-inclusive language was brought in some ways in the hymnal of 89 revision, with environmental and social issues also represented. There was a petition with many thousands of people protesting the gender inclusion that would have jettisoned classics, but in general the hymnal has been well received, and a kind of moderated gender inclusivity was brought into bear very subtly in some subtle changes. It's proved to be popular and continues today. There's a new hymnal to be revised, but budgetary constraints have meant the UM Publishing House has not been able to bring it out as of 2012.